So this week, I wanted to kind of basically do a brain dump on my trip to the UK because I found some really interesting stuff. And I think it would be cool to have some outside perspective. And ultimately, what we're always looking for is ways that we can kind of take the knowledge from other people and other places and use it to our advantage. And I feel like I've got a couple of interesting tidbits that we can get into.
Cool.
Some of them being kind of more observations, and then one being something that I experienced that I thought was absolutely genius. And I feel like we should be talking about.
Okay.
So the first day, I found out that there was a guitar store literally 2 blocks from the hotel that we were staying at. And I popped in and just was looking around, and they had some really neat stuff. And some of it is, the normal run of the mill stuff that we see. And then there was a lot of other things that I've never seen before. And it being just a local place, they were game to let me literally sit in there for hours and pick up anything I wanted to off the wall. And I pretty much did that. I played every guitar I felt like playing. And in doing that, I talked a lot with the folks that worked there. And one of them is a guy named Michael, who is very much a full-time working musician and does solo gigs and plays in a number of cover groups and original groups. And he was the person that I opted to do that interview with. And
Nice.
his story is fascinating. I don't want to get too much into it, but it was a perfect opportunity to get that kind of slice of life from a working musician in a town like that. So that was really fun. And I also found out that there is this other, like this giant music retail chain called Gear for Music. And it was still located in York, but it was outside of the city center, which is where I was located. So I opted to walk there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that trip was about 3 miles, and it was relatively flat. And luckily, most European cities are fairly walkable, and so getting there wasn't that big of a deal. But the weather did turn. I did have to take an Uber back because walking back in the rain just didn't seem like that good of a vibe. And I will say this now, there's a lot of talk about the mom and pop music store versus the big box chain store. And
Yeah.
we talk about that in the interview. But Gear for Music was a fantastic music store in a way that, again, I don't really have any sort of basis for comparison. Now, you could argue that a place like Sweetwater may be similar in its setup and scope, but it's a flagship location. There's only one of them, whereas Gear for Music's located all over the place in Europe. And it was clean, well maintained. The different departments were incredibly well manicured. It was a really unique experience. Walking into the guitar room, first off, it had DMX controlled lights all over the place, and it was decorated like to the hilt. They had like fake orange cabs, lining the roof of the room, and all of the manufacturer sections were kind of set up like convention booths. So like Boss had their own section, and everything was branded and decorated the way that Boss would want it laid out. And then there was a Line 6 area, and Fender had its own area. It was really well curated. And the selection was really impressive. It was kind of similar in the sense that they had a lot of stuff that we would normally, see. But where I was really blown away was kind of the budget guitar section.
Yeah.
Because I can go anywhere and pick up an EVH or a Gibson SG or whatever, but
Sure.
they had some brands that I was not familiar with, and they actually have their own branded instruments. If you are following the YouTube guitar review world, you've probably seen some of their stuff. In fact, this baritone that I got from Firefly, G4M is the brand name. They have a version of that exact guitar. So what it seems like is their work, and I did verify this with one of the sales reps there, is that they've got some deals with some Asian manufacturers that basically do white label guitars for them. And the variety of stuff that they have is really impressive. So it's not just like they're doing classic S-type, T-type guitars. They've got everything from their telly is called the Knoxville for some reason. But they also had like 7-string headless guitars, and they had a telly 12-string, which was really neat. I mean, they whatever you could think of, they had their own branded version of it, and the quality on this stuff was remarkable. That Knoxville, that it was like a heavy relic Telecaster, was I think 120 pounds, which is roughly $150.
Yeah,
it played phenomenally. It held tune. The pickups were great, and I probably spent an hour and a half playing all of these sub $200 guitars, and was truly blown away by them. There was another manufacturer called Jet Guitars, and they had some Strat and Telly type instruments that I really, really liked. And again, they were, I think, 150 pounds, so just under $200. Like, blown away. The quality, craftsmanship, sound, tuning stability, like top notch.
Awesome.
And then some of the other, I don't know if these were in-house brands or not, but they were some kind of budget line in the acoustic room. Let me see if I can find this. So for acoustics, they had this brand called Heartwood. Again, I've never heard of them. Really nice acoustics. Kind of running the gamut, more traditional dreadnoughts, but also these really neat kind of contoured body styles, and all really affordable, like 200, 350, 400 pounds, maybe on the high end, that played really, really well. And I was just having a blast, when I finally found one of the guys that worked there. The other thing that I noticed is that they didn't really bug me a lot. I was in that guitar room for, again, probably an hour before anybody even bothered saying hey. That was kind of an interesting observation. Normally I feel like in the States, the people who work there kind of check in pretty regularly.
Oh, they're all over you. Yeah.
And so I kind of like the fact that I was able to just kind of fart around without anybody giving me any static about it. That being said, a gentleman came in right after that and was looking for a specific guitar and was kind of miffed that nobody was there to get it for him. I ended up talking to him for like probably 30 minutes. I think I actually sold him the SG that he was looking for. He had these two that he was like going back and forth. He was like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know. I think that one sounds better than the one that you came in for. And I think he ended up going up with that one. So somebody got a nice commish off of my hard work.
It's very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It was a lot of fun and really, really cool layout and stuff. And then I started going into the other departments. They had a drum room, and they had, the stuff that you're accustomed to, but also some stuff that I had never heard of. Same with live sound. A couple of things that I was really keen on and hope that I can find here in the States is because I think there's a pretty big DJ culture in Europe. They had these light bars like we would get from Chauvet or whatever, but they were compact. They were like this wide. And so very similar kind of layouts with like the LED bars or lasers or movers, but something that you could fit pretty easily into like a briefcase style light setup. And I was like, shoot, I could use a whole bunch of those.
For sure.
So I'm definitely going to be looking up those particular brands and models to see if they're available in the States or not, because some of the stuff just isn't.
Right.
The other thing that they had was like in their pro audio section, I guess you would say, a lot of companies sell podcasting equipment and interfaces and mics and stuff. They had a podcast studio, like with the chairs and the mics set up. Everything was plugged in, powered on. You could have taken somebody in there and done an episode. And again, nobody bugged you, so you probably could have done it without anybody even realizing.
Right.
Which, again, really kind of neat.
Yeah.
And when I did get a chance to talk to the guys that work there, super nice, super helpful. Their system is kind of more automated. They've actually got self-checkout. And I think the other component of that is they have a very heavy online presence. And so the idea is that you would order something on the website, and then you would walk in with like a QR code, and then somebody would go to their warehouse and bring it out to you.
Sure.
I noticed there was a lot of that going on as well. Just, again, a very different experience than what I'm accustomed to in the States. But I'm a little envious of the gigging musician in that area, because the kind of gear that they have access to is really impressive.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they can get the stuff that we use. Line 6 had a heavy presence there, Head Rush, Quad Cortex. I mean, all the heavy hitters were in there. But then again, all these really neat budget brands. Now, Tommen does Harley Benton, so those weren't an option, of course. But if you went into Tommen, you'd have a similar set plus their line of stuff.
Sure.
So
Sure.
yeah, really cool.
That's interesting. I'm wishing, in hearing the story, that an American retailer leaned into that low expense. A lot of Asian brands historically have not been thought of as being very high quality, but automated CNC milling and a bunch of other sort of mechanized techniques have really brought the quality of the low end up. And I'm not aware of any retailer that you could walk into in the US and find a ton of those things. Mostly
Right.
it's online stuff. And, so it has sort of a second class reputation. Even though, I gigged an Agile Les Paul knockoff for many years, loved it. And it was $160 shipped,
Yep.
perfectly great guitar. It's just cool that you could walk into a place and find an inventory of those to shop from. That's not something we hear of much around here.
Well, and that buy was a roll of the dice, because you had no way of testing it before you
Exactly.
picked it up.
Yeah.
It would have been really great to have had the opportunity to pick something like that up and take it for a spin before, throwing the money down.
Totally. I mean, even though it wasn't all that much money, it's still, am I going to have to ship it back if it sucks? The whole
Right.
thing.
Yeah, the sunk cost fallacy that, you'd have to pay almost as much in shipping to return it or exchange it,
Right.
So I feel like it's a missed opportunity. And I said the same thing going to NAMM, that a lot of these Chinese manufacturers were cranking out like incredible instruments for the money.
Yeah.
And even with, Epiphone doing the custom shop collabs, those are Chinese made instruments that are literally incredible.
Yeah.
And they actually had a couple of those there as well. And I was talking to the SG guy about it. And yeah, it's just wild what is available out there now.
Very cool.
And then some of the other products that I ran into, this was back at RWB in downtown York. There was a company called Sure Gold, which is a legacy brand that I think they brought back, kind of the way that, they've done Dan Electro and some of the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And they were these really neat looking guitars that had roasted maple necks, but the body style was kind of like that Gibson Sonex retro 70s, 80s look, big pick guard kind of deal. Really, really cool guitars. Played great. And were less than 500 quid. I really liked those. And then just some crazy off the wall stuff that I was sharing in the Slack. So yeah, I'll be doing probably a bit more thorough rundown for some of those down the road.
Nice.
So that kind of sums up the gear component of this. For more of that, you'll just have to check out my interview with Michael next week. The other thing that happened is that we kind of lucked out that while we were in town, Amber's company was doing their holiday party. So we had a good opportunity to get dressed up and eat on somebody else's dime, which is never a bad thing. And it was actually literally at the hotel next to our hotel. So on a Friday night where it would have been absolute bedlam out in the streets. So that was nice. And it was one of those things where it was kind of like a sit down dinner in a ballroom, not really big, especially considering, the scale of like corporate events that I've seen her company do, or even ones that we've performed at. So it was a DJ setup. I didn't really have much expectations, and the music selection during dinner was questionable. I did mention that they played a bunch of weird stuff in a row, like literally as they were like bringing like the salad course out. Like, why would you play Rockstar by Nickelback while people are eating their salad? I don't know.
Salad. Yeah.
But what happened towards the end of the night is that, inevitably that DJ is going to want to like bust out and kind of turn the room over. Yeah,
it'll be party time.
And it's hard to kind of change the energy in that way without doing some sort of like announcement or whatever. There weren't any speeches. It was very kind of like low key corporate dinner. And so we're finishing up dessert and just chatting at the table that we're at. And there's this like commotion that happens literally right behind me. So I feel something hit the back of my chair. And all of a sudden I hear a bunch of like clanging utensils and cutlery. And the tray falls underneath my chair, and somebody hits the ground. So like one of the servers is like totally eating it right behind me, and so I'm immediately jolted out of whatever I was talking about because
Mhm.
this thing just happened. And as that person, as I turn around to see if that person's okay, he pulls a wireless mic out of his back pocket,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden, the intro to Mr. Brightside starts, and he gets on his feet and proceeds to sing the entire song. And so the idea was, okay, we've got to figure out a way to change the energy in the room. Well, the entertainment that they hired that night decided to dress like servers at the event, cause a scene,
Like stage an accident.
yeah, and then start their whole deal.
Hmm.
And another server did something similar, and there were two vocalists. It was a male and a female, and they proceeded to just kind of like turn the night around. They did a number of songs. They had us spread out into a big circle. They did conga lines, whatever. It was a lot of fun, and I was so impressed because
Mhm.
I was just like, that's something I never in a million years would have thought of doing.
Yeah.
And immediately when it happened, Amber turns to me and she goes, "I'm not doing that." So because she's like, "I know what you're thinking,
Yeah.
and you need to stop.
Yeah.
Just don't even
Yeah. You
don't
think
go
you're
any further."
stealing that idea.
Yeah,
Don't think that. Yeah.
but there's got to be a way to implement that in these kinds of corporate events. Maybe not to that degree, but just a moment that you use to flip the energy of the room. And
Right.
I can't think of a better way of doing that. And I had to do it. And I know Amber was just absolutely mortified, but I walked up to the guy and I was like, "I've been doing this a long time. And that was so smart. I've never thought about that before." Gave him one of our stickers or whatever. But yeah, it was such a cool idea. And I just, again, when you've been doing something like this for nearly a decade and somebody surprises you, catches you totally off guard,
Right.
like that's high praise.
Right. Right.
So my hat goes off to those to that little team. And yeah, so
Excellent.
there's some tips and pointers for you if you guys are trying to come up with ways of
Yeah.
getting the crowd to pay attention to you. That's a way.
Consider staging a tragedy.
I'm wondering if like the vocalist could do it as a way of giving the band an opportunity to like sneak on stage and like kind of prep themselves. I don't know if you could make a big enough spectacle to make that happen. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Something we're thinking about though.
Yeah, because that would be fun. Like, somebody drops a plate and the whole room like stops and notices.
Right.
And that could be the beginning of a little piece of theater.
And I mean, that's ultimately what it is. It's
Right, right, right. But I mean, long enough to pull focus for the band to sneak on or something. I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
we'll have to mull this over. And if you've ever seen something like this or your band does something like this, please let us know. Coverbandconfidential@gmail.com. I want to know all the tricks because again, I was so impressed.
Because you thought you knew all the tricks.
I did. And considering the network of smart people that listen to the
Right.
show
Yeah.
and chime in, it's just one I never heard before.
Yeah. It's a new trick.
So yeah, other than that, we did all the tourist stuff and flew in last night and jet lagged just a little bit. I should be able to go to bed at a reasonable hour this evening and wake
Good.
up mostly normal tomorrow.
Yeah.
But man, so much fun. If you have the ability to go and check out England, especially like if you're living in the States and you go to the UK, it's the easiest transition into the European experience because there is still a language barrier, especially in Yorkshire. I definitely there's a few things that needed repeating, but York is just a cool town, man. History aside, there's this place called Valhalla, which is literally a Viking themed metal bar
Huh.
that specializes in mead and stuff.
Nice. Yeah.
Amber and I ended up going there after dinner one night and ran into just this random gal and her friends from Manchester. And like we ended up spending the next 2 hours just like hanging out with them. And she bought me a shot of Blanton's, which is like absolute highway robbery in
Yeah. Yeah.
in the UK. I mean, it's expensive here. I was like, "Are you sure?" And like even the bartender was like, "Are you sure?" But yeah, man, we had a blast. It was people were great, town was great, experience was great. Just
Awesome.
all